Alright guys, like the title suggests, today we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the Borderlands 3, the system requirements that they say that you have to play this game. I want to also go through PC Port Picker and put together the ports list for the system that they recommend for this game. And I'm also going to do some testing on my system. We're going to see how this game plays on the RX 588 GB graphics card. If you like this kind of content, make sure you hit that thumbs up. There's that thumbs down button. There's that comment section down below, guys. Don't be afraid to use that comment section on me. If you really like this kind of content, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn that notification bell on. Let's get into what this video is all about, shall we? Alright guys, like I said in the intro, today we're going to be taking an in-depth look at Borderlands 3, the system requirements, and what they say your system's going to need, what kind of system you're going to need to build to be able to play this game at a reasonable frame rate of 1080p. Why I went with 1080p is because it's still one of the most popular resolutions for gamers today. I mean, you know, you got 4K, you got 2K, but by Steam, still over 90% of people still playing on 1080p 60Hz monitor. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. It's going to fit into most people's gaming experience and what they expect and what they want. I put together we're going to look at the specs now. Alright, Borderlands 3. There we go. The minimum specs is Windows 7, 8, 10. AMD FX 8350 at 4 GHz or an Intel i5 3570, 6 GB of RAM, AMD Radeon HD 7970 or NVIDIA GTX 680, and 75 GB hard drive. The recommended specs is Windows 7, 8, or 10, AMD Ryzen 5 2600, Intel i7 4770. I kind of like the way they say them two's equal to each other, which they ain't. They recommend 16 gigs of RAM for this game. AMD RX 590, NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060. I'm assuming they mean 6 gig variants there, I'm assuming. Maybe 3 gig. And 75 gig hard drive. That's how much space on the hard drive it's going to take up. There's the minimum, there's the specs. The minimum specs, I wouldn't even suggest trying this game with a 7970 or a 680. I mean, that's going to be low setting, 720p probably. Higher end specs, you should be able to get a decent 1080p gaming experience out of that with the settings cranked all the way up, which we'll see here in a little bit. I don't have the RX 590. But I do run the RX 580 8 GB card. So that's what my test is going to be ran on today. The specs of my system, I run the Fractal Design Focus G case. I got the AMD Ryzen 7 2700. I got the GIGABYTE B450M DS3H motherboard. I have the XFX Radeon RX 580 GTS Black Edition, 1405 MHz OC plus 8 gig, 256-bit DDR5. That's the graphics card I'm running. My RAM is G.SKILL Ripjaws 5, 32 GB, running at 3200 MHz speeds. For my storage, I'm running off of an Intel 660p series M.2, 1 TB NVMe hard drive. I also have a backup drive or main file drive. It's a Western Digital 3 TB 7200 RPM drive, which I'm not going to be running off of it. I'm going to be running off the Cooler Master Hyper T4 CPU cooler, and I'm running the Corsair RM650 80 plus gold certified full modular ATX power supply. When I do my testing, my windows will be completely up to date, my drivers will be all up to date, and all that when I get into the testing part of it. I went to PC Port Pickers list and I went down what they recommend. I went off the recommended specs for it, and I built a system on PC Port Picker to see what kind of system, what kind of price you would be paying for a new build to be able to play this game at 1080p. Like I said, later on I'll get into the testing and whatnot with the 580. A lot of these ports is going to be questionable to some of you. You know, some of you are going to say, why'd you go with this storage? Why'd you go with this case? And I'll kind of give you a breakdown of my thoughts behind it. Alright, to start out, we got the Ryzen 5 2600. That's what they recommend for the game. I went with the ASRock B450M HDV Pro 4 or R4 Micro ATX motherboard. Well, I went with this motherboard AM4 compatible motherboard is the cheapest B450 motherboard they went with. If you're going with 2600 Ryzen 5, should be on a B450, 350 motherboard. You really don't need a next series motherboard for a Ryzen 5. I went with G.SKILL Aegis 16 gigabytes at 3000 megahertz speeds. Yes, I know 3200 would be better, but I'm trying to keep the price down for you guys here on this one. The storage, this is also going to be questionable to a lot of you. I went with the PNY CS900 240 gig 2.5 solid state drive for 27 bucks, 28 bucks. 240 gigs is more than enough to get Windows installed, and plus still leave the 75 gigabytes of storage needed for the game. And if this game's going to be the only thing you run, that's going to be plenty. Of course, you go with a higher capacity SSD for more money. You can add a 1 terabyte hard drive for 30 bucks or whatever, you know, if you need more storage than that. The XFX Radeon RX 590 8 gig Fatboy OC video card. Why I went with this one was it was the cheapest RX 590 8 gig that I could find. The case I went with, this is going to be questionable too. I went with the Fractal Design Focus G, which is the same case that I'm running. This one just happens to be white. Why'd I go with this one? Because it comes pre-installed with 2 front fans. You don't have to worry about adding another fan to it. You can take one of the front fans, put it in the back of the case, you know, or you can run yours like I do. I just left the stock, you know, both fans in the front. My temperatures is fine on my system. So it'll be plenty for what you need for the build. You know, you can replace that with any $50, $55 case you want. And to power this system, the RX 590, they recommend at least a 500 watt power supply. I went with the EVGA BR600 watt 80 plus bronze certified. This power supply, it's basic. You know, for $56, it's a basic power supply. It ain't modular. It does have all black cables to it, or it does have all black cables, so that's a plus. You know, it's non-modular, which, you know, okay, you have a few wires you got to tie up, but to save the money, you know, it's a good solid unit. And it is bronze certified, so you know it's going to be somewhat efficient. So the total of the system we're looking at is going to be about $557.89. This is for the parts I picked out. You can look at this and you can adjust your motherboard. You can adjust your memory, which I picked G.SKILL Aegis 16 gigabyte because they recommend 16 gigabyte. G.SKILL Aegis is known to work with AMD Ryzen pretty well right out of the box. You don't really have to worry about compatibility with Ryzen like you do with some of the cheaper memory. There was cheaper memory listed for 16 gigs, 3000 megahertz, but that G.SKILL Aegis, I know it works with Ryzen. But alright guys, I'm going to get into testing the game with my RX 580 with the system that I gave you the specs to. And we're going to see how this thing performs. Here, let's roll the clip of the game footage and I'll be back. Here's the chart of the frame rates. This came from MSI Afterburner that you've seen in the gameplay. The average frame rate on Ultra was 50.6. On high settings, I was hitting 59.3. The minimum frame rate on Ultra was 40. On high settings, the minimum was 53.6. Ultra settings, it was 59.9 on the maximum. The maximum on the high settings was 61.1. Ultra settings on the 1% low frame rates was 40.6. On the high settings, it was 53.6. On the 0.1% low frame rate, on the Ultra, it was 38.4. And on the high settings, it was 41.7. So the RX 580, it's doing better than what it would do on a console, but it still ain't actually hitting that average frame rate of 60 frames per second like most people want. On high settings, you can get it up to 59.3, which is awful close to that 60. You can probably go in the Ultra and turn down some textures and whatnot if you want to do something like that to get it up to that 60 frames per second. And playing on high settings, which is the way I played in my walkthrough of it, you know, that does pretty good. It hits right around 60 frames per second, and I didn't notice any stuttering. I didn't notice any lag or anything like that in either one, in the Ultra settings or the high settings. There is a settings above Ultra. I didn't try that because I wasn't hitting that 60 frames per second in the Ultra settings, so I didn't even try that one. I stayed stuck with Ultra or high because it ain't hitting it in Ultra. It ain't going to hit it in anything more demanding than the Ultra settings. But yeah, guys, the RX 588 gig, I think it plays this game fairly well. I don't see no sense in upgrading to the RX 590 if you have one. If you're building a new system or you're looking to build something to play this game, I'd get the 590. Or maybe even something a little bit better if you can afford it, depending on what your budget is for the graphics card in your system. But that was my results on the RX 580 playing the Borderlands 3 game. Alright guys, that's going to pretty well do it up for today's video. Make sure you hit that like button or that dislike button on your way out. There's that comment section below, which I go through them every weekend or Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on my live stream. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you like this kind of content, or if you're into tech and you like to try to save some money while you're building your computer. Until next time, you all have a good day. And I'll see you in the next video or live stream.